Welcome back, and in today's video I'm going to add another chapter into the concrete series. We are going to talk about pouring concrete and what the process looks like. For those who have not done that before or not familiar, I'm going to go through a couple of steps, a couple of things you might not know about concrete and the pouring process. Hope you guys enjoy. Let's get into it. Now, before any concrete trucks come to your job and even one drop of concrete is poured, it's your job as a carpenter to double check everything. Go through all the formwork, make sure no rebar is touching the formwork. If needed, you're gonna put dobies, that's little concrete blocks. You're gonna make sure that separation, you want at least 1.5 inches, 3 inches preferable, but you want at least 1.5 inches so that when the concrete's poured, that there's not a lot of jostling around, because that concrete comes down really hard and fast. You might push the rebar close to your formwork, and that burning is gonna cause that rebar to be exposed on your finished product, and that's an absolute no-go. So you want to make sure that you're checking, going through, hitting everything with your hammer, make sure all the John-A's are all tight, making sure all the clamps are on there, they're tight on your strong backs, making sure you're checking to see, hey, maybe I can put in the kicker right here just to give a little more extra strength. These are the times when you have the moment before the concrete comes that you're doing all the small things, because once that concrete's going, you're not going to be able to fix minor mistakes at that point. It's time to go. You're going to be constantly scraping the formwork up. You're going to be constantly following to see if there's any blowouts happening. So do these things before the concrete even comes. One of the most important things is having a clear game plan. Everybody being on the same page, knowing exactly how the pour is going to go, how much concrete you're going to pour in each form, probably one time through, one pass through, maybe a second time through, depending on how tall the formwork is. You want to make sure everybody's on the same page, so that way in the heat of the moment, nobody's confused, nobody's taking hoses apart when you still need to go back to a certain spot. You want to make sure there is a clear vision that everybody knows before things start getting chaotic. Now, there are two main ways that we usually pour concrete into our formwork, and that being one being actually into a boom lift, where then they'll pour concrete in the hopper. You have somebody operating, moving the boom around, and you have somebody actually manning the hose, and they're pouring the concrete into the formwork. That's the easiest way, because they have a lot more control about, the consistency of the concrete, how much is going out, at what elevation. They're able to follow it fairly easily. It's a lot less mucking. Guys that are actually pulling the rake and pulling the concrete, you have the guy with the vibrator. It makes it so much easier. It's less labor intensive. But sometimes you're on certain jobs where either you're in the city and you don't have parking, or the layout of the building doesn't allow, you might have to use line hoses. Now, that's a lot more labor intensive, because you have to move the hoses manually, and they're very, very heavy, especially when there's concrete. It's kind of like you find yourself like, everybody pull back, 1, 2, 3, pull to get that momentum together. So it's a lot more labor intensive. You pray that if you have the concrete pour, you can use that boom lift, because those hoses are heavy, and throughout the day, having those ropes and pulling them and lifting them all the time, it gets exhausting. So make sure if you're doing that you have, a couple little snacks in your bags, because if you're doing with a line pump, you're not gonna stop moving those hoses until the day's over. So make sure you prepare yourself mentally and physically for those days. One of the most important people on a concrete pour is whoever's manning the vibrator. Now, that job is so important, because if it's not done properly, you could have catastrophic events as far as like blowouts, the concrete not being vibrated properly, and you're having big holes. I've seen jobs where the wrong person on the vibrator doing columns, and there's huge massive holes in the columns. You can see all the way through daylight. So that's a catastrophe. You want to make sure that the person knows what they're doing, and they're not having their first outing on your job. You want to make sure if they are being trained, they're being trained properly. It's very important, because someone who knows what they're doing with a vibrator, they know certain areas. Okay, this area right here, it's more loose ground. You want to make sure you handle this more gently, because the chances of blowing out are a lot higher. Yes, we did, kick it properly, stakes and all that, but sometimes over vibrating will cause, catastrophe. So you want to make sure that the person, you give them the heads up of where there could be potential hazards. Also, the person with the vibrator can make your life so much easier by like drying the vibrator and bringing it to elevation for the concrete so that you're not breaking your back, shoveling the concrete into holes. They can help you make your life so much easier. So the person with the vibrator can really make or break your concrete pour. It's a very important job and it should not be underestimated. So I kind of want to go over what the term lift is and like monolithic pouring. So when you're pouring and you're doing a monolithic pour, that means whatever's in the bottom, you could have like formwork right here, coming down right here, and this could all be hollow too, right? You'd be pouring this all at one time and you just go. Everything is poured at one time, and as you go, you pour the whole formwork as you go, all at one time. But a lot of times, especially if you are having thicker walls, you cannot pour everything at one time. It's gonna put too much pressure on your formwork and the chances of a blowout are much higher. So it's important that you understand what a lift is. Now what a lift is, a lot of times depending on how tall your formwork is, it may be half. So you pour this half right here and this represents the concrete, right? And you're doing that because all this concrete right here is putting pressure on your formwork and gravity is pulling it down. So you're gonna have a lot of pressure at the bottom. And especially if you have like a cutoff piece, maybe a smaller piece of formwork right here, a lot of pressure is gonna be on these joints and at the bottom, and it's gonna wanna push out. So you wanna make sure that you're pouring one lift so that you're kind of minimizing the amount of pressure that you're putting on your formwork. Now you'll go through and pour your whole entire formwork through with concrete. Then you'll come back and pour the other parts. This will be your second lift, right? But you're not done at that point. You still have to agitate the place where these come together so that you're not going to cause a cold joint and you're not going to cause air pockets. So the person who's manning the vibrator, again, like I said, he's a very important person, or she is a very important person, because they have to know exactly how far to go down right here, right? Without making this whole entire section also liquefied, because that's going to defeat the whole purpose of doing a lift. So they're going to agitate this and liquefy all this concrete, getting all the air bubbles out, making all the rock settle, but also coming down and just disturbing this enough that these combine, because you don't want a cold joint. A cold joint is where two pieces of concrete are coming together, but there's air pockets left over and it causes weak points. And so even if you patch that together, they're not combined together properly. You want to make sure that you're agitating with the vibrator, coming down, agitating this part just enough that these come together and combine, but you're not liquefying this whole entire thing. Again, that's why the person manning the vibrator is so very important. Now, if you're just getting started, most likely you're not going to be asked to be the person who's doing pour watch, because that's more like a more seasoned person, because that job is very important, because you have to know what you're looking for. You have to know, okay, when something's failing, you have to know before it goes catastrophic. So a lot of times as an apprentice, you're going to be a lot more reactionary, being told what to do, and the person doing pour watch is supposed to be the person that can react before, like to see things buckling, to see things moving before it gets crazy, so they can throw something kickers down, or throw some stakes down and pound them in before things get too crazy. Know when to cut the concrete and have them move to a certain section so that things don't get worse. A lot of times with concrete, if things go bad, you just want to mitigate how bad that process actually is. So if there's going to be a little belly in the wall, it's much better to have that than have a full-blown blowout where now they have to chip it back and then cut it with a concrete saw. A lot more grinding, a lot more like trying to fix stuff. Sometimes you might have to cut the whole entire wall out and start all over again if things get too bad. So you want to make sure the person, if you are on pour watch, your eyes are open, you're watching, you're looking not just where the concrete's being poured, but also where concrete has been poured previously, to see if the weight of that concrete is making anything shift, anything move, and you have a sledgehammer on you so that you're not searching around. There are stakes, within arm's length, so you can grab those real quick. If you're not actively involved in the pour, say they have a boom lift pump truck, and so you have like one guy operating that, one guy doing vibrating and one guy doing pour watch. Your job should be, gathering all the excess materials not being used, bundling it up, getting it dunnage so that when everything's done, you can have separate places for everything to go. Once you start stripping, everything's in piles, everything's getting neat. Make sure you're constantly moving. You don't want to be stationary just talking to somebody or chilling, because that's not the time for you to be doing that. Your time is to be productive as possible. So make sure you're constantly moving, helping out wherever, making sure that if anything was to happen, that you're ready to go and jump into action if needed. So that's your job as an apprentice or somebody who hasn't done a pour before. That should be your main focus, is helping others, but also cleaning up and getting everything ready for the next phase of the project, which is stripping and getting everything bundled to ship out to the next job site. After all the concrete is poured and everybody can finally breathe, that sigh of relief, everything is done properly, you want to make sure that you get right into the next couple steps. These are very important because the longer you wait, the harder it's going to be to, finish the concrete. You want to go by and get your margin trowel and scrape the top edge form to make sure you have a clean surface for, your trowel later on. So if there's a lot of concrete buildup, you're not gonna have a proper surface to run by to level everything off. So you wanna make sure all this is scraped off, everything's clean, so you have a nice little workspace. I know a lot of carpenters are really nervous when it comes to finishing the concrete because they don't have the expertise. And I think a lot of times, if your company is still performing and asking you to do that, they're not expecting perfection, pretty much just knocking it down to elevation and just, putting a thin layer of cream on the top and making sure it looks decent. They're not expecting you to be like a mason and having everything perfect. If they expected that, they'd hire a mason company or have a laborer who specializes in concrete doing that work. So again, they're not expecting perfection. Just do the best you possibly can. A lot of times this stuff is going to be buried or backfilled. It's not, high level finish stuff that's going to be seen by the public's eye a lot of times. So just do the best you possibly can and you should be fine. After the concrete pour is done and everybody is, grimy, everybody's tools are all filthy, everybody's, cleaning them up at, the eco pan, using a brush. Again, it's very important to use a brush when you do use your concrete tools, because if you don't, the concrete will build up and it'll be harder and harder to clean off, and you want to make sure that surface is clean as possible so the finish comes out as nice as possible. You'll be filthy, you'll be dirty, you might not have had a lunch depending on how the concrete pour went. I've been through many concrete pours where, we'll work from 8 o'clock all the way till 12, 1, 2, depending. So you might get a nooner, you might get sent home after everything's done. It's important that you cherish these moments, because a lot of times when stuff is really, really difficult, that's what brings the crew together. You kind of all been through something where it's like labor intensive, it's very, very difficult. So I advise, if I was you, like, do something afterwards, have a beer with the guys, do something, like, especially if you get sent home early, people aren't expecting you at the same time. So go out and just kind of have some camaraderie with each other, because that's something that's missing so often, especially when you go through a long concrete pour. I've been through some that have been like 16 hours long, and after that you're really exhausted, but you look at your guys next to you, you guys all went that together. So it's important that you have some kind of camaraderie from that. Like, hey, look at your fellow carpenter, say, that's a good job you guys did today, great job, let's go have a drink, let's go get a burger, let's just go down and just kick it for a second, because you guys earned it, you know what I mean? And I think it's very important to build a cohesive crew moving forward. I would like to give a huge shout out to one of my subscribers, Wolfman Jack. He's given me a lot of ideas as far as tools to purchase and just video ideas. I really appreciate him. If you want to contact me or talk to me, join the Discord channel. We can possibly do a live stream and you guys can have a Q&A with me. So let's just talk. I'm building this channel with you guys in mind, so whatever ideas you have that might help grow the channel, I'd appreciate it. Thank you guys. So hope you guys liked the video. Hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you guys did, please like and subscribe. I'm gonna have a shorter video when it comes to the stripping, but I didn't want to make this video too long, so hope you guys appreciate it. Thank you guys for watching. I'll see you guys next one.